Number two, the big lesson for South Africa. Try and avoid unsustainable fiscal commitments. Looming in the horizon in South Africa, if not properly handled, is the national health insurance, which will put so much burden on the fiscus that its sustainability is in doubt. So I'm happy that the minister is putting out the issue for further discussion, and you'll be advised, I'm sure, accordingly. So the failure of the Greek society to meet those two basic things resulted in this huge expenditure. Unsustainable pension commitments, etc. So whenever you hear a politician who comes to you and says, vote for us because we're going to increase your pension, you must say, no, wait a second. Where is the money going to come from to pay for these increased taxes? And if they say from the tax system, say how big is this tax base that's going to sustain this large fiscal commitment? When I was still in government, we had a basic, simple guiding slogan that a left-leaning political party must adopt conservative economic policies. Wonderful slogan. The reason being that the majority of the population does not trust left-wing parties with running the economy. And that the evidence of that is throughout the world to see. And so when we were in discussions with the Workers' Party of Brazil, we said, you're a very left-wing party, you stand a good chance of getting into government, but you are likely going to mess up the economy. So try and adopt conservative economic policies. And they did. And that has been one of the most successful left-wing political parties so far. Okay, that's the European story, which, as I say, I'm afraid that if it's not well handled, we might enter a September 15th moment. Now, what about Africa? Sub-Saharan Africa. The April issue of the World Economic Outlook estimated that Africa is likely to grow at about 6% this year and next year. In part because of the good performance from Angola, Nigeria, possibly Kenya, and Ethiopia might also perform better. But Tanzania, Zambia, Mozambique, performing very well indeed. And in West Africa, in addition to Nigeria, Ghana, performing very well. With the renewed enthusiasm as a result of the discovery of oil and gas, and a new status of being a middle-income country. Inflation is likely going to remain fairly high, though, at around 7%, but this is low by historic experiences. But the problems in Africa are that even when the fundamentals support better economic performance, other forms of human behavior undermine that economic performance. Quite correctly, democracy is growing on the African continent, and we like that very much. But there are some challenges. There are some African political leaders do not want to hand over power when their time comes. They hold on to power forever. Some have to be literally dug out of their presidential houses and told that your time has come to an end, daughter. It's time for others to govern. And one of the problems, by the way, and this might sound very small, and I'm worried about that in South Africa because there's the language is creeping in here in South Africa, and we must watch it. You see, in political science, there is no political party which is a ruling party. It doesn't exist in political science. A political party governs after receiving a mandate from the voters. So when you hear people saying the ANC is a ruling party, they're wrong. It's a governing party. Mswati in Swaziland is ruling. Because he's a monarch. You see, it's a difference. Before you celebrate. So there's a clear distinction in political science between a governing party and a ruling monarchy. And so some of these guys in Africa, once they get elected, they stop thinking about themselves as governing. And therefore, they want to rule forever and not want to leave office. It starts off as a conceptual problem, but it grows in people over time. Something that has to be watched very carefully. And some of these folks, I don't know what has happened to them. I mean, Ethiopia, and then Zimbabwe, Equatorial Guinea, and other countries which I can't mention in case they affect my business opportunities. These folks must learn to get out of power and allow us to run these economies much better. The problems of armed conflict on our continent are very serious, and they disturb the natural flow of the economic development process. We know about that. Poor infrastructure, and the relics of socialism. What do I mean by that? You might recall that over many years, many African countries self-styled themselves African socialist countries or African socialism or some things like that. Zambia, huge state bureaucracy, a mining sector which had been nationalized, losing about $1 million a day, and so on. So the shift away from that system to a market economy seemed still to be grudging. So at heart, still a socialist, trying to practice market economics. So from time to time, these things bubble up, and their behavior sometimes as if they do not welcome private investment. People make it very difficult to invest in some of the countries. So rigid that you feel like just picking up your bags and go. But I learned from some entrepreneurs like old man Labna, yeah, that the more difficult an economic environment is, watch out for the prospect to make money, because others will run away from the situation. So if you've got some investments in Zimbabwe, hang on to them. The day will come when you make more money. Overall, I think the African picture is improving, and I think we have much to be positive about. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I was in Angola, opening a very large plant that we have constructed there as NAMPAC. And the place is booming. And I think provides huge business opportunities. Difficult as the regulatory environment is. Whilst we have BEE here in South Africa, there you have got almost compulsory state partnership. So we put up a plant at $167 million, and we have a 30% stake by the government. So you might think it's difficult. I said, well, if you don't like it, go. Somebody else will put the plant. So we said, well, we like the idea of having local partners anyway. It's not a bad idea. What about South Africa? And I conclude by this, because I know you want to dance. I, as a pensioner, want to eat. To some extent, South Africa is still in the phase of an experiment. Are we going to succeed and join the developed countries in the medium term? Or are we going to go the route of countries which have not succeeded? To summarize the text which I have, which I hope they'll give you copies of, I tend to analyze South Africa using the analogy of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let me start with the good. We have a prudent fiscal policy framework and policy. What does that mean? It means a budget deficit, preferably, that is less than 3% of GDP before borrowing. Now, of course, in terms of crisis from time to time, one can exceed that, as long as there's a commitment to come back to that principle as early as possible. And I think we have got that framework in place. And we have the capacity and capability, which are two different words, to collect tax. And I know it very well now as a provisional taxpayer. It's tough out there. Those SARS guys are real bad people. They don't even have sympathy for pensioners. Second, we have an independent central bank which pursues its objectives independently without fear or favor, and it has the primary objective of price stability, this being given meaning through the inflation targeting framework. Now I hear that the bank has a new mandate and this and so on. Well, it doesn't, actually. Mandate is the same. Pursue low inflation within the inflation targeting band. It hasn't changed. That is the best way to contribute towards sustainable economic growth, development, and job creation. We have a well-resourced National Treasury Department with some of the most capable technocrats in South Africa. It's very encouraging. They irritate us from time to time, like suspension of section 34 or something like that. But it's okay. We can discuss with them. At least they're open to conversation and discussion and debate. And I think this is something that we need to protect, that capability and capacity in the National Treasury. We have a democratic parliament, which is good. And I heard that those MPs who tend to go AWOL will be punished, which is, I think, is wonderful. It's really great. Because, that's our tax that they're spending there. We have a strong judiciary, which must always guard its independence against any encroachment by the executive. We have a presidency that supports the macroeconomic policy framework mentioned above, but I would like to urge them to do more in defending the central bank and the National Treasury and the frameworks within which these two institutions function. Because, when people try to learn how to write a press statement, the first thing they do is to attack inflation targeting. They don't even know what it is, more often than not. And they like to attack the National Treasury. If you watch carefully, those are the two institutions that tend to come under a lot of attack, because they are the bedrock, the glue that holds the macroeconomic policy framework in South Africa. If you destroy those two, quite a number of you will start buying apartments in Switzerland, I suspect.